All right, welcome everybody. We have another console room panel for you today, and this one is 40 years of season 18. I can only speak for myself, but for me, it's a pinnacle of Doctor Who, especially in my formative years of watching it as a teenager. But we're jumping in way sooner than we should. I think maybe we do some introductions here of our panel and then kind of get going with some chatter about season 18. Okay, so I'll start off. I'm Mike Rogers. I've been a Doctor Who fan since 1982 when my mom forced me to sit down and watch this really dumb show. And I think one episode later, I was hooked on Robot. And I've been watching it ever since. So I'm really excited to be here today. Looking forward to a great conversation. So, Jeff, how about if you jump in next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Elston. I have been a Doctor Who fan since, I can't say 100% for sure. I always claim around 1986 or 87. I was very young, 4 or 5 years old, because one of my brothers got me onto it through Iowa Public Television, which I think is also how Mike got into it. I was too young to even remember what my first episode was, but it's been part of my life for as long as I can remember. So really excited to talk about season 18 because it's the end of an era. It's the beginning of a new era. Very exciting. So hopefully some good conversation to come. So why don't maybe Bill, you want to go next?
Sure, Bill Evenson. I probably started watching in about 1982 as well. Yeah, I've been a fan ever since. I don't know what else to say about me. I like Doctor Who.
My name's Dave Barsky, and I got a lot to say about
You're
Bill
on
Evenson.
Oh.
There he is, interrupting already. Anyways, Dave Barsky, I've been watching since 1980, ironically, but not season 18. We didn't have it back then. We just had the first 3 seasons of Tom Baker in suburban Boston, where I grew up. All the Boston area, for that matter, the PBS channel there. And I happen to love season 18. I didn't at first for a couple of reasons, but I've grown to appreciate it as one of my favorites now.
Very cool. All right. So, I think there are a lot of different kinds of topics we could get into with season 18. I'm wondering if maybe starting with something that would be an easily identifiable topic for season 18, and that's just like the drastic aesthetic change that occurred from the previous seasons to season 18. And so I guess for each of you, I'll just kind of open up here. What are some of the biggest changes in the aesthetic of Doctor Who from your vantage point? What really popped for you when you saw that whatever first episode from season 18?
For me, it's always the title sequence. Like, watching Doctor Who for as long as I have, and there was a really specific emotion or vibe evoked from the time tunnel variations that we had for many years before that. So then when you leap into this Starfield and you've got this sort of oddly grimacing Tom Baker, which I guess he didn't look super happy in his other 6 seasons opening sequence either, but it was immediately you knew you were in for something very different. Neon logo, stars. It evokes a different, more it's 40 years old now, but at the time, more contemporary vibe to the show for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we didn't really understand at the time, but that's what a producer does. They come in and they make a different mark. They want to make their own mark. I'm not disparaging television producers by any means by saying that when they come into a show new of an existing show, but John Nathan Turner's first season, and that's why we have a different title sequence. We have a different outfit for Tom Baker. His whole costume has been slightly redesigned, but more monotone, for lack of a better term, really. New music ideas, new story focuses, more tone as far as with the story outside of the that has a little bit to do with, of course, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the script editor, the previous script over being the Douglas Adams comedy vein of everything versus the computer-minded Christopher H. Bibby in this season, which I'm just going to go say it, I prefer greatly. But yeah, John Nathan Turner's first season.
I do
is
and I
definitely...
don't actually. That specific point, I was wondering how long it would take us to get to that point. Overall, I find it kind of annoying, but like every once in a while, it's great. Like I watched State of Decay the other day, and that old computer. Like the problem is when you're using you're taking your sci-fi show and putting the best modern technology on the show. It always looks aged. It ages terribly, and in that one it really works well. Actually, I really like that about it. But the thing I was going to bring up was the music too, which I think is a step down. I'm here not to praise season 18, not at least not entirely. I do love season 18, but I think the music is a sign to me when I'm watching the series that I've reached that point where I don't know.
So you're more of a Dudley Simpson incidental.
I'm more of a Dudley Simpson guy. I remember talking to a friend of mine 20 years ago now, probably, where the topic of Dudley Simpson came up, and he said, Dudley Simpson, he thinks the show wasn't any good after he left. And I was like, is that wrong? I mean, I just think it's a sign of a change that I could do without.
I'd say it is wrong. I don't know if it's better, but it's not that it's not good. Bill, to your point in the music, though, I do prefer Dudley Simpson without a question. However, I think there's an overall mood throughout this season, and I think the music used in this season greatly enhances that mood. And if Dudley Simpson were attempted, the instrumentation, the types of things he used, is generally more horrific rather than somber and epic. I think that's what we really achieved here. That there's impending doom throughout this whole season. Of course, it culminates with Tom Baker's the Fourth Doctor's regeneration, and I don't think Dudley Simpson would have achieved that as markedly, quite frankly.
Yeah, and there's we have some chat going here during our panel, and someone had a good call out, our friend Matt, about Dudley Simpson maybe having run his course. He had been doing the incidental music for quite some time. So was it even if you're fans of him, and I like his music as well, but I also like the era we stepped into with season 18. So do you feel like was it time for a change? Well, because I do think that you have a really good point, Barsky, around I don't think Dudley's music would have or could have really evoked the type of sort of this through line of moroseness, because we were coming to the end of this long tenure, and I don't think that he would have brought it to life, but not in the same way that it was throughout this season. So Bill, would you have rather had Dudley Simpson score this season than every subsequent season after this? Or were you happy to see a change?
I mean, that's the other side of it, which is just that it is a change, right? There's so much change, so much changes. It's almost surprising we've got the same Doctor because there's so much change. Because in the modern series, you wouldn't see that. You would probably see a new Doctor, and it would be everything changed. So just the fact that it is change, I think, is a plus for the season. It's just, like you said, I think we all agreed we prefer Dudley Simpson. So, I mean, it's just, to me, it's a step down.
Well, and it's just a single change. Like, I mean, the obvious electronic versus more traditional application, but also like Dudley did a season after season, every story, almost the entire Tom Baker run, I think from maybe Douglas Camfield bringing in a different composer. And now you're getting like 2, 3, or 4 different composers bringing a different style. And even though it's all electronic, so it's kind of in a similar vein, you do get a little more variety that way.
And I would say, not to get ahead of ourselves or anything, but like you said, Barsky, I think it is probably a great soundtrack for, say, Legopolis. I wouldn't change that at all. So there,
something good about season 18's music right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, and I think Peter Howell handling the theme song can't be like understated, overstated. It can't be like acknowledged enough, in my opinion, because I think there are so many ways to get it wrong and only one or two ways to get it right. And for me personally, that neon logo version of the theme tune really pops. Like it's still today, I just enjoy it.
I mean, right from that title sequence right into episode 1 of the first story of that season, The Leisure Hive, there's a difference. It's there's the neon logo, there's the theme song, but then Doctor Who, the Doctor sitting on Brighton Beach in an extended pan. I mean, when we've ever had that? I mean, it's ridiculous how lingering that is.
Yes.
And then the Quantels zoom out. I mean, it's like I hated it. I hated it when I first saw it. I didn't like any of it. I'm like, this is not the Doctor. Look, I got into Doctor Who, I've said many times, for the monsters. But this was completely different. And of course, I didn't hate it as much as the Rebus operation, which, was, it barely had a monster in it. But this was different, and it felt different, where the Rebus operation felt like, they had elements that carried over from what I was used to. I had 3 straight years of the first 3 seasons of Tom Baker, and then all of a sudden the Rebus operation shows up, and it's more talky, and it's again different, less horror elements. But then this comes along, and it all seemed to fit together, although I wasn't sure what I was watching. And I think, granted, the first 2 stories of this season are rougher, but especially when we get into E-Space and the way it ended up, I think everything really coalesced.
Well,
especially the monsters. I'm going to talk over you, Mike. Like I said, I was going to. Sorry.
Yeah.
Especially the monsters. Like you said, Leisure Hive, the monsters are terrible. But we get some really great monsters over the course of the season.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was when you said monsters, Barsky, like I immediately thought, like, well, look at what we've got. We've got, alien-looking people in the Leisure Hive, and we've got the Fomasi, and we've got Meglos, and we've got Marshmen, and we've got vampires. We've got, the return of the Doctor's biggest foe. Like, if you like monsters, although I can see how a long panning shot of changing huts on Brighton Beach doesn't inspire, like, oh, this is going to be full of monsters. But when you get
those
into
monsters in Leisure Hive are pretty bad.
They're
especially
bad.
for a kid. They're not anything.
Yeah.
I mean, but honestly, after the previous season with the giant trash bag monster, as we call it,
that's true.
And that sort of, and the Nymons. I did appreciate what they were trying to do, and they were getting back to harder science fiction, which I was always a fan of. I didn't hate the prior season. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the jokiness, and although I think Tom Baker always had that snarkiness to him, so it fit for me still. I felt this was the harder sci-fi edge to the stories of this season really helped me appreciate it. Although I appreciate what they were doing in a lot of stories when I grew up, so to speak, and learned to understand writing and directing. And honestly, there's a story in this season that's in my top 20, of all classic Doctor Who.
Wow.
Meglos. Yeah.
Not quite.
Obviously.
Well, and I wonder too, kind of like along the same veins of aesthetics and feel, it seems to me like everyone is flexing really hard throughout season 18. Like you look at the directors, like you mentioned, Dave, how, that long panning shot, and Lovett Bickford was the director on that. And he even gets dragged a little bit in the commentary by Lowell Christopher H. Bidney, like teasing him about it still 40 some years later. But it feels like everyone is like trying to like pull everything they can out of their hat, whether it's through the incidental music, it's the costume design. But so I wonder, could we talk a little bit maybe about the directors, because there's a wide variety of directors throughout season 18 that really influenced the look and feel of it. And I'm wondering, are there any standout directors for you, panelists here, for you guys, that you really look to and you're like, that person really nailed it?
Bill?
Yeah, let's start with Bill.
Over to you, Bill.
I don't know the directors for season 18. I'm sorry. But all I know is Lovett Bickford, because he tried to do, I think you can tell he is really trying in Leisure Hive. But I don't know how successful it is. I think he's trying to make, I don't know what this phrase is, lipstick on a pig or whatever. That story's doomed.
You know,
But
the budget didn't change, right? From season 18,
Right.
season 17 to
Yeah,
season
good
8.
question. But I think, didn't Bickford go way over budget, and that's why he was never asked back to Doctor Who, if I recall correctly? So maybe it didn't matter that the budget didn't change because he went over
Well,
anyway.
to be fair, I mean, listen, the whole country was rife with inflation toward the
Yeah.
late 70s, and they
Yeah.
all went over budget, and that's why
Yeah.
they didn't come back. That's
Yeah.
the problem with studio television production with BBC. You're in a
Yeah.
box, and if you don't fit in
Yeah.
that box, you're out. And
Mhm.
honestly, some of the one-time directors in the whole history of Doctor Who didn't fit in that box, and to me, they were the best directors because they blew the
Mhm.
budget. I mean,
Right.
Paul Joyce in Warriors Gate does so many amazing things. Absolutely, that's one of the top 20 stories in my book.
Yeah.
I
Really?
alluded
Wow.
to. Yeah, absolutely love it. And what Paul Joyce is trying to do and the crazy stuff that he did, he reminds me of what's his name, Michael Evenson, who did the Ark in the first Doctor story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy, had these huge crane shots in the studio, which I'm still, every time I look at it, I'm like, is that really in that little studio? And a live elephant on the stage. And
Yeah.
but Paul Joyce, he actually showed the studio lighting and incorporated it into the design of the ship. And, and that was a big union no
Sure.
to the BBC. And that was a problem. And that's another reason why they hated him. And I think was it him or what's his name from The Leisure Hive we talked about got fired halfway through. Glover Pickford got fired, right?
Might have been.
I think it was Paul Joyce.
I think it was probably both of them.
Yeah. Could be.
Again, it's probably not disparaging producers making their mark, but it was John Nathan Turner is doing his thing, and granted he brought in new people. I think that was Paul Joyce's first and only story. Yeah, and I absolutely love what he did with that. And again, visually, and what he did with the characters, and again, the writing was there to begin with. And I hated that story. Bored to tears with that story when I was a kid. Yeah. And now I know now I get it, because I'm a college educated man now and I understand certain things.
Well, when you think about,
go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, you think about, you mentioned how the director, everybody was sort of flexing, and a couple points that came to mind for me, sort of on the director's. I mean, you have Warriors Gate, which takes place primarily in a large white void, but then you also have the actual gate, both sort of in the current time and then back in the past when the Tharls are still sort of in power, and you have these sort of what can look really cheap, but are in this sort of strange way sort of evocative, these black and white photographs that sort of sub in for part of the landscape. And then you have something like Meglos, which is very studio bound. You have lots of CSO when it comes to being outside the dodecahedron and things like that, or outside the I think it was outside the dodecahedron. And you have what I think is some really great looking location stuff with State of Decay. You have great big satellite dishes, both in real life and models in Legopolis. So I think there's just a big variety. But the other thing I wanted to say, when you think about flexing, and seeing the chat here made me think of this as well, is how the directors and everybody else, the players as well, had to flex around what I gather was the sort of day-to-day nature of the relationship between the two principal actors. The personal life of Tom and Lala was very present on screen, when there are times when they're really clicking off each other, and there are times when they won't look each other in the eye, and you can very clearly see it. So I can only imagine what that's like for a director who's trying to evoke a certain mood from the story, and for the other players who are like, am I stepping in the middle of something here? You know what I mean? So that also, I think, contributed to the vibe of this season in a different way than, say, in season 17, where it seemed like they were very much sparking off each other in a very positive. You think about the lightheartedness of running through the streets of Paris, or dealing with a big egg and Creature from the Pit, just a very different feeling altogether. And so it must have been interesting for the directors and everybody else to have to work with in some cases, and work around in other cases, that relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's because the question was Matt had asked, when did things head south for Lala and Tom? Can we see that on screen? I think I like to look for that. I care about that, but it's hard to tell because they're in the wrong order. I believe they made State of Decay before they made Megloss, but when you watch it, it doesn't. They must have made up between those two. It seems like to me
Yeah.
because they
State
State of Decay is the
barely looks
one.
at her.
Yeah, he looks at her maybe 1 second in the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm wondering if we can kind of pivot as well, because we're talking tone and Barsky, you mentioned like just appreciating it more, from a different lens, older, more educated. And that made me think of Christopher H. Bidney. The script editor has a lot of influence over the tone of a season and of each production. So I guess I'd like to open it up and just have a conversation about Christopher H. Bidney. Do folks feel like, what were his strengths coming into the program that season? What were some of his deficits too?
It's tough to say. I mean, like I said, I do like the more hard edge science fiction that he brought to the show. I think he is a good writer. I think it took him time to get his feet wet as an editor per se. I mean, I think State of Decay was shot first. It's tough because that was a Terrence Dicks script. It's been around for a while. And how can you go wrong? Terrence Dicks knew the structure of the Doctor Who 4 episodes better than anybody else in the history of the show and ever will. So that was, pretty much baked in. So he got lucked out with that. But I think he really hit on. I think he learned a lot. And honestly, I don't think he has a lot of flaws, really. I honestly, I want to see him as a guest at convention more than any other single human being. I've never seen him at a guesting convention. I love him to come to the United States. I've always say that. I mention that to every convention showrunner that I meet. So I'm fascinated with the series.
Yeah. Console room showrunners, take note.
Yep.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
I don't know. I think it really works here. I think because of Tom. Like it's almost like it shouldn't work. He's bringing that hard edge sci-fi. He's trying to make things more serious, and it's still Tom Baker, and I think that's why it works. I think if he had stuck around much longer, we might not look back on it so warmly. I think he's a little stiff.
You think Tom is stiff?
I do think that J&T imposed that on him because he wanted him to do certain things that Tom's never done before. I know they knew each other from before because J&T has worked on the program prior in other roles. But I again, everything comes back to J&T, and of course, the way he molded the show evolved, and in the umpteen years he was involved in it after this. But I mean, Tom has changed, and he also suffered some weird illness before this, right? And his hair is not as curly anymore. So he has changed, and he knew he was leaving.
Yeah.
And that added to
that's true, right? He had quit before they started, right?
Yeah.
Well, he quit every season. Wasn't that sort of how it worked? Like he quit for every season,
right? But he knew.
Yeah,
he was leaving for sure.
Yeah.
Well, if I recall from some of the documentaries on like Blu-ray and the DVDs, there were a lot of clashes between J&T and Tom Baker, between Bidmead and Tom Baker. So the
between
tension,
Lala and Tom Baker,
right? Like
Waterhouse and everyone.
Yeah.
Whoever directed Bickford and Tom Baker couldn't have gotten along too well based on the behind the scenes footage I've seen.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, J&T was a stronger producer than Graham was. The 3 seasons prior, was it? How many? 1, 2, 3.
2.5, 3.
Yeah, something like that. So, Tom got away with a lot, in the 3 years prior to this season. And J&T wouldn't have any of it. J&T was a no-nonsense money guy. If you didn't know that, anybody watching this, I know everyone on the panel knows, he was, what they call the production unit manager. We call it unit production manager in the United States. He was a dollar and cents guy, but he also he understood theatrics and he knew what he wanted. And I love him for that. I think, certain things, certain aspects of what he wanted to do with the show got off the rails eventually. But it worked in this season for me, the way he changed it and tried to put a stamp on things.
Yeah, and I think it's, JNT clearly had a very, that decisive pivot in mind when he, did everything, from the new title sequence to the new script editor to the new types of stories to crowding the TARDIS again with multiple companions to obviously getting rid of the outgoing Doctor to very specifically wanting to get rid of K9 so that he wasn't, sort of an out for the Doctor in the same way he would do with the Sonic Screwdriver the next season. Like he had very definite ideas, but I think what you said, Barsky, about, he was someone who was very big into tapping the promotional nature of the show. Like, let's get into conventions and let's get into like putting the show out there, and let's have, I'll produce a pantomime at Christmas and I'll have Anthony Ainley and all these other, Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, all these people from the show in it because it helps cross promote. So he very much, I'm sure, had that in mind from the jump, because he was, you talked about a little bit about like the directors and things like that. And, you working in the television industry, like it's interesting because, he was a staff producer. He was on staff at the BBC, like, which is, I imagine that's not at all how it would work now. A producer that you work with, or when you're a producer, you don't work with, you're not NBC or Discovery's producer. You're a producer who's coming in to do this show. So I wonder how that maybe could have influenced some of the decisions he made, at least from a dollars and cents side, because that's his boss, because he works for the BBC. But then I think the more, I don't know if you call it creative side, but the more eccentric side, whatever, had him really getting into the promotion to get the show more and more out there, which I think was important because he was going away from an actor who'd been in the role for 7 years. So for some people, all or most of their living memory was Tom Baker as the Doctor. So, it would be important to make sure that the show could stand as a brand without Tom Baker as season 18 came to an end and moved into the Peter Davison era.
Can we move into maybe some areas of JNT's weaknesses? And this is my own personal bias, but like when it comes to character and story, I think he doesn't shine as well there as he does in like some of the more practical production side of things. So a few of you mentioned like the crowded TARDIS. So I wonder, can we take a few minutes to maybe talk about like these new companions that were brought in? Did having 3 work? Was it, again, let's maybe just pick it apart and dissect the crowded TARDIS concept.
Well, first I want to say, I don't think that really came into effect until the next season. I mean, he introduced, the 3 companion TARDIS in the very last story of this season. But yeah, that was a big part of it. And, and going back to what you were saying, Jeff, about marketing, I mean, right down to their costumes. I mean, Adric never changed his outfit. That was all about marketing. He wanted action figures so you could identify who Adric was, identify who Tegan was in her airline steward outfit, and then of course Nyssa in her princess outfit. Until everything got crusty and everybody started questioning it. And I mean, I honestly don't think JNT, maybe it was rookie season luck. He really didn't have as many weaknesses as he showed throughout the rest of his career on the show. I think, given the hard edge of the sci-fi here, the Tom Baker-ness of it all, and maybe it's just like, he's just getting his feet wet and he doesn't want to show, other than, sort of the overall mood of the season, he doesn't get harder about those things until the next season, maybe even season 20, when he's definitely aiming for things.
And
it's funny when you talk about, I'm going. See, I'm doing it again.
You do it.
It's funny when you talk about those they're like have uniforms basically, because that's one of the things I think about when I think about the JNT era, and I think of it as a criticism. And over time, I think it's valid, because it's funny. We're here to talk about season 18, where Lala changes her outfit at least.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing.
Yeah.
I think that though, I mean, the one thing that JNT wanted to do, it didn't quite pan out, is he wanted June Hudson to be the overall costume designer for the entire season. I mean, it was too big of a job, and she was smart enough to say no,
right?
Which is great for a lot of reasons in my book, because I think she falls back into the Russian Cossack thing too much throughout her career, especially for Doctor Who. But she did some great things this season, including Lala's outfits all the way through are awesome. I love those. We're gonna go that direction. I think they're really cool. They're really smart. And she designed Lala's original outfit as well. Sort of the faux doctor outfit.
Yeah.
But she did a lot for this season, including Warriors Gate Gundams and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to your point, Barsky, about the costuming, and I think also Bill, yours as well. Like we talked about how maybe some of his weaknesses, J&T's weaknesses, showed after this season, and I pretty firmly believe that that's because he was still producer, obviously, for the rest of the series' original run, but a couple things. One, in this season, he was still dealing with an established pair of lead actors in Tom and Lala, and if you've seen Lala at a convention, like I would say she's very clear about the fact that she wanted to wear different costumes in every story. Like she would never have done what they did for Nissa or for Tegan and just worn the same thing all the time. But when we get to season 19 and beyond, it's all new actors, and so I think it's much easier for him to be like, Tegan wears this all the time, Nissa wears this all the time, Adric, well, he wore the same thing the entire time, in the same way that the Doctor does, more or less, going forward. So I think that he, I guess, sort of, whether it's gains confidence or gains more control in that way, because he's dealing with actors that he has brought in himself rather than who he inherited. And there's also, in the chat here, Matt had a good point about how Barry Letts was brought back this season as an executive producer to sort of oversee JNT's first season. So I wonder how much of that, was he tempering some of that? And when he was gone, and JNT had sort of total free reign, is that when, those weaknesses started showing as well? So I did want to ask you, Mike, since you brought this up, I'd love to know from you, like, what do you think, like, what is an example of a weakness for JNT for you?
Well, and I don't know if it's, this could be Christopher H. Bidmead as well. But like, because I recently went through and rewatched season 18 with my daughter, and when Adric's introduced, there's such variation in how it's written, from Full Circle to State of Decay to Warriors Gate and beyond. And in some of the stories, he's just, they try the Artful Dodger for a little bit of State of Decay, and then it just dropped. And so for me, Adric is just widely variable. He's a different companion almost in every story. And so I don't know if that's a JNT criticism or maybe a Bidmead criticism.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think one thing we got to remember here, as far as the stories and the writing, in the United States, what we call a showrunner is an executive producer, supervises the scripts and all that kind of stuff. But arguably, the script editor for Doctor Who is more of a showrunner than the executive producer is. Right. So you just get away from titles for a second and understand. Ever since at least the early Pertwee era, that's the way it has been. The script editor has been in control of all of that, and more of a showrunner than an executive producer on Doctor Who. Producer.
And the script editor hated the idea of Adric as an Artful Dodger.
Yes.
Mock that idea in documentaries and stuff. So maybe that's where it really comes down to. The script editor wasn't on board with the concept.
Well, I'd also argue, though, it's just, you get so many writers in, script editors should really mold that consistency. But I would argue that every single companion was best written by the original writer or creator of that companion. Yeah. No matter what.
I wonder.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, okay.
Well, too bad.
Tell us how we're wrong, then, Bill.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was going to say I don't think that's true. What Jeff's just said in the chat. I think we have more time than he thinks, but because we didn't start till 7:45. But
No.
I'd also say, Bidmead's got a responsibility then to make Adric into something else if he wants, even.
Yeah.
Adric's a failure as a character, I think.
Do you think that's true in this season and in season 19, or just one or the other?
True. It's less true in this season. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought once I said it. The next season, we'd established that pattern that you would almost just think that Adric's a bad guy, because he'll actually does it in State of Decay. You get the impression he might side with the bad guys. Yeah. So I guess it starts early. You have no idea what this guy's going to do.
Yeah, and he just wasn't that. he wasn't particularly likable. Not that characters always have to be likable, but you know, there was some chatter here in the chat about his brother more you know, more varied and, you know, more rough around the edges and wouldn't have a badge for mathematical excellence. So
I
I
didn't like
understand.
it,
I mean,
though.
why would a math nerd be an artful dodger?
fair question.
Ill-conceived.
Fair question. Yeah.
I mean, be
Right.
fair,
And
the
I can see
character's
how
created by a 17-year-old. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I could see how
Right.
Bidmead would maybe have that exact same reaction. He's like, you know, he's this math whiz, and I'm writing or script supervising, you know, these hard sci-fi stories. Why would I need him to play an artful dodger role? And again, in the comments in the chat here, you know, maybe some of that was down to you know, Matthew Waterhouse was very young and a pretty inexperienced actor. So there's a question of, you know, what would his skill set stretch to, given his lack of experience, you know, at the time, because he was what, 19 or 20 years old, something like that. So very young. Which
It was only a
Was he
second
even
role,
19?
too, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it was very early in his career. So,
But ironically, they got it right in his last episode, the last story he was in, Earthshock, where it's basically his ego about his math prowess killed
right.
him.
Down to his last line, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'll never know if I was right.
Yeah.
We should warn people about spoilers. Sorry, everyone, if you haven't seen Earthshock.
Yeah. Well,
I
now
won't
you
tell you
don't
what
know.
story.
That is true. That is true. We get much better endings for characters. That's one of the things that you can notice in season 18 is Lala's finish might be a little abrupt, but it's you see it coming. We have reason to believe it's going to happen over
Yeah.
the course of this season.
Yeah.
Tom Baker's ending obviously is telegraphed way in advance.
Totally.
And Adric's got a good ending. We're starting to get much because we've seen it throughout Doctor Who. Some of them are really terrible. How many
Yeah.
people just disappeared off screen or got married or whatever?
Dodo, we miss you, Dodo.
Yeah, Chib won't
I don't know
bring
why
back.
Canine just gets carried off like a piece of luggage. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a failure.
It is interesting though that she, you know, because she came to the Doctor, you know, not under her own power in the slightest. She was dropped on his lap to help him find the key to time. And she, you could argue, leaves very much under her own power. She's like, no, I don't want to go back. They've called me back, as we
true.
learned in Meglos. And then she's like, no, I'm going to stay and help the Tharls. And then he says, K9 works on this side of the mirrors. Take him with you. I don't want to fix him, I guess. So it is interesting because, you know, if you think about the sort of the agency, like, it's not as if with Leela at the end of Invasion of Time, where she's like, I'm in love with Andred, even though that was not
Yeah.
at all telegraphed. Lala
Yeah.
just, there's something about her character as Romana that I can fully buy into, her just saying, I'm not coming with you. And I had no reason to tell you this before now, and maybe I just decided it, but I'm staying. You know what I mean? Like, she has the agency to do that, rather than just be sort of, you know, like with Dodo in the middle of a 4-part story, she goes away and then her replacement says, oh yeah, she's not coming back, you know, at the end of episode 4. So
Yeah, that's
better than that,
that's
at
maybe
least.
the worst one. But I
Yeah.
think you're trying to talk yourself into it being a little better than it is. But I don't disagree with you. I think that is the
Yeah.
point that they're trying to make. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that they had a need to get rid of her and K9 both, and we knew that Tom Baker was leaving, and so I can
Tom had a
absolutely
need
see-
to get rid of her.
Yeah.
Tom
Yeah.
said, "Get rid of her."
Right, and so yeah, so it does feel abrupt in that way, but I can at least buy into the character reason to do it, so that I can appreciate.
Yeah.
And then
At least it was telegraphed, right? Like in full
You're
circle, and even in Meglos, technically, really,
Yeah.
you know, they're being pulled back to Gallifrey, and it's clear she doesn't want to go back there.
that's true. That's true. You did have that seeded beforehand.
Mhm.
That's true.
And at least it beats holding Andred's hand in episode 5. So
Oof.
then that means
Yeah.
Right. It was a stronger telegraph
and
than that.
and Legopolis is a little bit stronger than what we see with the end of like the 10th planet, where the Doctor is not feeling well and falls over.
Right.
Barely in the episode.
And then disappears for an episode and a half.
Well, you mentioned Legopolis, Bill, and it's kind of this thing looming in season 18. It's Tom's departure, and I wonder if maybe now is a good time to kind of delve into that. And 7 years, longest Doctor ever. So I guess I'd like to start with, what are your thoughts on, was 7 years the right amount for Tom? Did he stick around too long? Did he leave too early? What are your thoughts on on Tom's departure?
Bill, I feel like you're maybe the biggest Tom fan. I feel like you should get this ball rolling.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably about right. If you'd ask me again in 10 years, I might have a different opinion. I keep changing on it because I just can't get enough of Tom, basically. But um, you know, I think the reason to even ask the question is given how Tom behaved under the Williams era. He there's some stuff going on there that's almost indefensible on screen, that you can see that's like not, it might have been time for him to go, right? But then when you bring in season 18, then you see him. I don't see that happening anymore. So maybe all Tom needed was to be shaken up like that.
Yeah.
I go either way.
I mean, listen, it's again, everyone, people, when you meet people at conventions for the first time, Doctor Who, who's your favorite Doctor? As I always say, I don't have a favorite Doctor. To me, it's about the writing, the stories. And, that's where the inconsistency lies in a lot of it. And you can see it with someone who's spent so much time as the Doctor in a 7-year term. Again, going back to the producers and what they do with the show, the script writers and what they do with the show, and what they allow this star to get away with. Yeah, Tom. Look, everybody know how Tom had ego. He was pushing Graham Williams around. He finally got in his final season with Graham Williams. Douglas Adams, who he loved because it was a big joke to him. I mean, not that Douglas Adams considered a joke. He took his job seriously, but he was jokey in his writing. Tom loved that. I'm not going to say got a little, I didn't say it went out of control during that season, the prior season to this 18, because Tom always had that snark to him. So it worked okay. So I'm not going to say Tom spent too long. I just think, they hired the wrong people for his tenure on occasion.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there's a little bit of the chat here, and I think I completely agree with it, is, that Tom's era, I think one of the reasons why it doesn't feel like, 7 years, why doesn't he just leave already, is that it feels like sort of 3 distinct eras. You have, more of the horror for his first two and a half seasons, and then you have more of the comedy for the next sort of 3 seasons, and then you have the season that we're talking about here with season 18, which is a sort of series or a season on the decline, not from like a rating standpoint, but the end of an era. So it does feel very different. There's a big variety of producers, of script editors, of companions. You have what you would normally see sort of doctor to doctor, like the way one doctor has to sort of be a counterpoint to the one before them. You saw some of that within his era. How the Graham Williams era was absolutely a counterpoint to the era that came before it, because of the violence and Mary Whitehouse and things like that. And you got to see stories like The Deadly Assassin, which were very much a departure and gave Tom, for a story at least, what he'd been asking for, which was a companionless story. So you got these different moments that made his 7 years feel like more of a variety than, say, another doctor's 3 or 4 years, for example.
Another 5 years of Colin Baker might have not had such
right, that's true.
William.
Again, Matt in the chat brought something else up, with, the overlap of producers. He alluded to the new version of the series. They change out, and when the new producer comes in, they change out the doctor, generally because they want to bring their own thing to the show. And that's what they're more like what a current showrunner in the United States is, rather than the way television was produced in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s from the original series. So, it was more, it wasn't necessarily, I mean, the producers put their own stamps on it, but it was more about the stars who were running the show back then and how they could promote the show rather than the showrunners. I mean, listen, I get it, like networks now trust certain people to run shows for financial reasons, for creative reasons, and they will give them other shows, just like Chibnall got this show now because of his track record with other shows he's done, just like Moffat, the same. You have to prove that you can, tell a story, come within budget, and hold an audience. It was a little different back then, so it wasn't about, true showrunners. But it will never, I don't think we'll ever see an overlap of doctors in this day and age, between showrunners. / producers.
I wonder, can we pivot towards the story itself and maybe make some comments about aspects of Logopolis that you think work really well, or is there any part of it that still today you like, oh, it doesn't work for you?
They changed that flat tire for like all day.
A while.
No. I mean, it's got a lot going on, and it pulls it off. I think Logopolis is really good.
Yeah, and I kind of going back to I think to Bidmead and his approach to hard sci-fi. I really I love, and I am biased because I sort of love everything to do with the TARDIS, whether we're talking about the police box exterior or just sort of the ship interior. But I love everything to do with the ship, and so I love all of the the TARDIS inside a TARDIS, police box inside a TARDIS. Like I love all of that recursion and block transfer and all that sort of stuff. And I love that it's in some ways kind of an evolution of the show when we talk about, and it was again sort of seeded through this season, like when we talk about the whole short hops thing, and how in E-Space, like, oh, short hops are easier, and then by the end of the season in Logopolis, we've got him 2.3 meters off target, what a landing. Oh, that's not bad for the TARDIS. Yeah, that's what I said, what a landing. And then he's able to move the 2.3 meters. I think there could be a whole untold story of how much time had passed, relatively speaking, when he moved the TARDIS those 2.3 meters. Big Finish come in.
Big Finish.
The 2.3 meter series featuring Auntie Vanessa. But yeah, so I enjoy all that. I do sort of agree with you, Bill, that whole sort of first section can feel a little overlong in some ways. But to Matt's point here in the chat, as we talk about like some of the sinister aspects of that story, considering it's the end of that Doctor's era, and we've got a sinister new master, and right from the jump at the beginning of the story, we've got a police officer on the phone. What we later learn is the master's TARDIS materializing around that police box. A sinister laugh. He's pulled inside. Later, he's shrunk. And then Auntie Vanessa. Like I think there's a lot of cool aspects to this as the end of an era, the end of a season. There's some, I mean, right down to the way the Doctor dies. I mean, although yes, the way it was shown on camera is ishy, but the fact that he died, I mean, physically has fallen from a great height and smashes into the ground, like that's a violent death. And what a way to bookmark, this is the final end of a Doctor who's been here for a long time.
Logopolis is, to me, the ultimate final episode of any season. Let's just for those who don't know the order of stories, Leisure Hive and Megapolis, Leisure Hive and Meglos were the first two. They're a little bit of an outlier, those two stories. Then we get the East-based trilogy with Full Circle, State of Decay, and Warrior's Gate. Yes, it's a trilogy within itself, but there's this impending doom. We're outside of space and time. You got all this crazy stuff going on for all the other reasons we've talked about stylistically, with the music, with Tom Baker's acting. And then we got the Keeper of Traken with introducing a new companion, which we don't know is a new companion to Logopolis itself in the final story. And then the Master returns. We can't forget about that. He returns in the Keeper of Traken and takes over Nissa's father's body and returns. So it's a story arc going on from Keeper of Traken, Logopolis is, as Custer Val is in the next story. But with all the doom coming with the music, with entropy swallowing everything in sight, including Nissa's home planet, Traken, the return of the Master, and then you get a cloister bell, something we've never heard before. And my God, that's some stuff. I mean, that's the most iconic thing of this entire series for me. Is not this season, the cloister bell. When I was watching that for the first time as a kid, I was like, "What the hell is going?" The TARDIS is warning him that some shit's about to go down.
Right.
That was amazing. I was hooked. I was hooked. And it was just all epic. It was all epic. As epic as Christopher Bidmead could possibly pull off being competing.
Right. And on that same note, you have, we've never heard the cloister bell before, and we want to talk about sinister and morose, like the Watcher. Like, literally, the Doctor's future is coming to stare him down. And take his body. Like, like that never happens before, and it hasn't happened since. Like, that's a very, again, final end for this doctor.
Someone said something about in the chat. Was it Matt? Probably said that now it's the chat's going too fast. It was that it wasn't Davison's doctor.
What?
Never mind. It went by too fast. Say it again. Never mind.
You can scroll back.
The Watcher. Oh, Ruben said it. The Watcher thinks it's Capaldi's doctor, not Davison.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. Actually, it could be Tennant. He went everywhere.
I like the way Bidmead also reached back and pulled in that E-Space trilogy to incorporate it in here. That the whole point of those random gaps between universes was to keep entropy at bay. And so it put the season together really nicely. The two trilogies, and I really enjoyed the final conflict on the telescope. It had that Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty,
sure,
feel to it. And
agreed. Well, you have you talked about the callback to the E-Space trilogy, but one of the little moments for me that I love about Logopolis is the moment where we learn later, we don't necessarily know in the moment, but the doctor is listening to a communication from Nyssa about what's happened on Traken, and you would never normally get that kind of a callback. And then she shows up, friend of the doctor brought me. You assume that's the Watcher. I suppose it could have been David Tennant, who knows? But just all these little things. And you've got, Tegan is my favorite companion. I know, like her or love her, but like I love Tegan, and the way that she gets inserted into this story. And from word one, she's not scared. She's sort of scared because she doesn't know where she is. But the moment she sees the doctor, she's like, I want to talk to who's ever in charge of this ship. You know what I mean? And then, then she's in it. And then when she said something about her auntie Vanessa, woman in the white hat with red sports car, and he's like, well, you can feel the change.
She walks into a police box and says, I want to talk to the pilot.
Yeah.
Like almost
lots of
immediately.
Pilots in a police box. It doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, it's a little much.
Not to mention a console of the TARDIS doesn't look anything like console of most airplanes I've been in.
Yeah, but even that level of absurdity feeds into what you're saying. She's not afraid. She's she's afraid, but she's brave.
Yeah,
brave heart. Tegan.
She ain't gonna go down without a fight.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
An interesting random thing that I read just like on Twitter, I think it was Twitter the last day or two, is someone pointed out that all three of these companions had a family member killed, before joining the cult.
True.
That is interesting.
That in and of itself is pretty dark. Like, when else can you say that with Doctor Who companions, that they all had someone die?
And then one of them gets killed.
Yeah.
You're right.
J&T. Yeah. Bloody savage he is.
Well, especially like when you think about Nyssa, because her father's killed and then comes back to life as the most evil, villain in the universe. So it's insult to injury. There he is right behind Bill right now. So just really dark stuff, and really like again with Tegan, like when they're in Logopolis and they're all supposed to get on the TARDIS and leave. Tegan's like, the hell with that. You represent safety. I'm going with you. Because you got me here, so I'm sticking with you. So again, just even seeing a different, and this was sort of happening with other companions as well. So it wasn't limited to her, but like really, I think represents more of like the companion didn't just have to be screaming, and they could be self-reliant and have a very strong stance and not just sort of say yes, doctor, whatever you want to do. So, but
credit to J&T if if that was something he did inject into the series, the familial murders. That's good drama. That's classic drama.
Yeah.
And that's what compels us about this season, I think, in good part.
Yeah.
It's a good point. And I wonder if now might be a good time to kind of open it up. We do have an audience here.
Yes.
Maybe Q&A, and you guys have lived through it. This is my first panel doing it like this. So what's the best way to draw a person in?
Well, I would love to, Matt had a couple of good questions, and I would love to invite him to just unmute and ask one or both of those. So Matt, let it rip.
Thanks, Jeff. So first question, Mike, we've got to hear your thoughts on the season 18 scarf.
Trust me,
It's
there are
behind you.
3 people in this entire universe that care about the season 18 scarf, and I'm one of them. No, I'm a big fanatic of Tom Baker scarves and have tried to reproduce them. The scarf itself is, I think, beautiful. It's 3-tone instead of the Tom Baker 7-tone that we've had previously, but it's made out of this really delicate material. And I don't know if you ever go back and rewatch season 18, you can see literally the scarf falling apart midway through the season. It's got holes,
Wow.
got major tears in it.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's a very delicate fabric, and this is incredibly nerdy of me, but I've always wondered, what if he did a season 19? They'd had to have made another new scarf for him because he destroyed it in one season.
Wow.
Well, didn't
Well,
Peter
then
Davison
literally
do that anyway?
destroyed. Yeah.
Yeah, Davison
Yeah,
just.
that's true.
But no, for me, it's an iconic look of season 18. And yeah, I love the look of it. I know that one time there was talk about maybe even ditching the scarf when they were considering doing the season 18.
Wow.
And I can't remember if it was J&T that insisted or if it was June Hudson that insisted that it needs to be in there. But
I know they fought over the question marks on the lapels,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure about that. I don't know
Yeah.
Who was right
about which.
about the question marks?
Well,
Does
she
anybody
was.
does anybody want to defend the question marks?
It's just too on the nose, really.
Yeah.
Well, and let's not forget what it turns into by the time we get to season 24.
Oh God, yeah.
Literally a jumper full of them. So
Yeah.
It's true.
Jumper.
yeah.
the thin
And
wedge.
an umbrella.
Yeah. And an umbrella. Yeah.
Now,
And
I know-
Matt had,
Second question, Matt. Oh, here it comes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then the other question: what do you think about the second ever Christmas special, Canine and Company, and do you consider that part of season 18?
No. No and no.
I mean, it's fine. I don't hate it, but no, I don't consider it part of season 18.
What
J&T did. He paid for it with budget from season 18.
I disqualify it just simply because of the opening theme tune.
Oh, it's fun.
I am very glad that it was included on the season 18 Blu-ray set, which
Agreed.
is fantastic and remastered, and
Yes,
everyone
it looks
should buy
great.
it.
Yes, agreed. So go buy your if you're in North America, you'll be looking for the complete Tom Baker season 7. If you're looking on the eBays for the UK version, of course, it'll be season 18. And I do think Ben and a couple other people had asked this as well, both for Canine and Company and throughout. This season marks the return of John Leeson to the role, which so there were some questions around what do we think of that, and I think. I do kind of like David Brierley's interpretation of the voice in season 17. Not that we got to hear a lot of it, but I am glad that with this being the end of K9 in season 18, I am glad that it came back around to John Leeson. Although again, they had him roll into the ocean, and they broke him down entirely in Warrior's Gate. So they found ways for him not to have to necessarily do a lot.
He gets his head knocked off.
He gets his head cut off by a marshman.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Poor K9. He really went through the ringer in this season, but I'm glad that they ended it with him. So what other we have a comment about the question mark. I think the intention was that a question mark is just how the doctor's signature looks in Gallifreyan. That's interesting. That was Robert saying that.
Well, then he says that just means he's trying to copy Laverne DeFazio's shirt style. Then
right,
which was way better.
Right. Fair. What other questions do people have?
Mm-hmm.
Felicity's asking, was she drunk? I don't know who she is, but
probably.
Yes.
The answer is probably yes.
Yes.
Matt asked another question. Jeffrey Beavers is the master. So we, you mentioned this, Barsky, and we've sort of touched around the master. And so we have, two different masters. We have the return of the decaying master, played by Jeffrey Beavers. And then, of course, the transformation of him into Anthony Ainley, playing the sort of regenerated master. Yeah. What do people think about Jeffrey Beavers as the master?
Shoot, I thought you were going to leave it a little bit more wide open. I wanted to say that Anthony Ainley comes out firing right out of the gate. I think he is a villain that fights Tom Baker. You know what I mean? Even though he only does it once. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Beavers is fine.
Well, the problem is he doesn't have a lot to do. You know,
Yeah.
he's kind of chair bound in his Melker TARDIS.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to really be objective about it because I have seen at this point, when I first saw that story, the Deadly Assassin umpteen times.
Yeah.
And I thought that was creepy as hell the way they did that. And I
Yeah.
was really thrown off the fact that they didn't duplicate the cheesy eggshell eyes.
Right.
And it just bothered
me. They upped the ante with the painted on teeth. Around
that was
lips,
that was terrible.
Does anyone? I feel like I've looked this up before. Does anyone know or have a strong opinion, maybe, around why Peter Pratt didn't come back to reprise his role?
Good question.
He probably just
the answer
wasn't
to that question.
available. I'm sure they say it on the DVD, but he probably wasn't.
Yeah.
Available. You know, just like, you know, what's his name? God damn, getting old.
Frank Gorshin and Batman.
Yeah, Davros, original Davros. Why can't I think of his name?
Michael Wisher.
Michael Wisher. How dare I forget his name?
Yeah.
He just wasn't available. They invited him back. That's the way it was, you know.
Yeah,
true.
What I do like about, and you're right, Barsky. He wasn't allowed to do a whole lot in this particular role. But I do love how and I don't think it's deliberate, but it's so indicative of the master, and we see it echoed in Castrovalva at the beginning of season 19. But he has Melker, which is in itself a TARDIS, but then he has his own TARDIS within Melker. So you think of it reminds me of the trap within a trap line from Castrovalva. Like, he was prepared for something to go awry potentially, and he's like, okay, I can get out, that's fine. And then not only that, I'll use these powers to sort of renew myself, just like in Castrovalva, how he's going to destroy the Doctor, but he's like, just in case he figures this out, I have a whole fake city, fake people. I have a whole fake thing set up for myself. So I kind of like that.
I think season 18 is too smart for me. I didn't know all this stuff you were doing. Can somebody watch it with me and like tell me what's going on?
Yeah. Next panel is the start of, I don't know how many hours it'll be, but many hours of watching season 18 together. So stay tuned for that. For sure.
I could do a whole panel just on Warriors Gate.
Oh, next year, 2022.
Yeah, and of course, like as we're sitting here now in January, or when this is airing, because we are pre-recorded on this one, I think we're closing in on the 40th anniversary of Legopolis. I think we're right around Warriors Gate by this point in the year 1981. So it's kind of crazy to think how time has marched on.
God damn.
Yeah, so I guess we'll have to do a 40 years of season 19 panel at the next console
year.
room, which I will absolutely be in on, because the Fifth Doctor is my era. I already said Tegan was my favorite companion, so sign me up for that one already.
I don't know. The reason why I probably have so much reverence for season 18 is it is the one that I've appreciated more and more every time I've watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think that's a really telling indicator of the quality of the stories, that you can think about how you first saw them, 30, 40 years ago, and then think about how you see them now, and it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have like a panel that you're going to be in here later on in the console room that's worth mentioning right now?
Well, I don't know how these going to air. I mean,
we don't know the airing order.
This could be the last panel of the whole damn convention.
That's true. It could be. But we
enjoyed it.
Yeah, we already did a panel. We already did one on the villains of Doctor Who, the non-monster villains. We have a missing episode panel. Maybe we've already done or coming up. We have some live panels that you'll be hopefully with us live for. Of course, I can't remember any of those off the top of my head, because we're not doing
the Mandalorian panel, if you like Star Wars. The Mystery Science Theater panel.
Yep. Yeah, I really can't remember the other live ones that we're doing. There's one about the TV movie.
I'm going to bake a cake on one of the panels.
Oh,
I'm going to, yeah, I got the flour and the sugar, and I'm going to bake a cake.
You better at that than cutting tile?
Yeah, the Great British.
A little bit. It's a Dalek cake. I'm going to make the Dalek cake.
Great British Bake Off.
You might have already missed that one.
Ooh, only if you use recipes from the Doctor Who cookbook we have in the chat here. So you can make the kippers of Traken. It ties into season 18.
The kippers of Traken. Oh no. I'm doing the kippers from Faulty Towers, so be careful.
Great. Even better.
All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap up here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Dave, for coming and participating and sharing your love for Doctor Who and for season 18. So I know I've had a great time just sitting and chatting with you guys. So
Wait a minute, I have a question. Does
Yeah.
Bill still
Uh-oh.
not like season 18 now after this
Oh, did we change your
insightful
mind?
commentary?
I think, okay, so in preparation for this panel, I tried to watch season 18 in order from the beginning. And I talked to you, Dave, and Jeff, I think, at one point. I was struggling, and I think it starts out really not so great. But so all I did was just skip ahead. And from full circle on, I think it is. It's pretty powerful stuff. I like it.
Oh. So just the first 2 stories are a little wobbly for you, and then it gets better. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Good.
I mean, that's one of those stories is Meglos, which we could do a whole panel about Meglos too. And we didn't even touch on the fact that we have returning Barbara Wright, Jacqueline Hill as a character in Meglos. So
He's totally wasted
there's
anyway there. I mean,
yeah, well, that was sort of the banter in the chat happening. She was kind of wasted in that role,
I didn't see
unfortunately,
that.
but nice to see her back.
Mhm.
all right. Well,
Great.
thanks everybody. We're gonna sign off.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. See you at the next one or next year, because
we'll
maybe
see
this is
you
the
next-
last one. Who knows?
Damn, we should
See
do
you
one
on
every
Zoom.
month. Who cares?
Sure, why not?
Sort of tavern-like thing.
We can just
Yeah.
go in order. We'll talk about season 19, next week. And oh yeah,
Yep.
that ended in a doozy.
Yeah.
Times
No.
like
Yeah, it's all building up to that one, just
Yeah.
like this season.
time
I
flight.
am-
Yeah,
I
it all
am
culminated in
Khalid.
time flight because
Culminated in time. Like,
I
okay,
mean, yeah. Best left
I'll
for
skip.
another day,
I'll skip the
another
next
panel.
7 until you roll back to season 1, and we can talk about that.
Oh, okay, great. Well, sounds good.
cool. All right. What
Thanks,
are we talking
everybody.
about now?